So by no means is this meant to be a profound lecture. Rather, I'm just giving you sort of a quick look at Anthem for Doomed Youth. It's up to you to kind of learn a little bit of context and background on this poem on your own. So let's take a look at these few short lines. Wilfred Owen was what's called a war poet, and he and several of his colleagues served in World War I. He only lived to be about 25 years old or so. So we're looking at, around 1918 or so, 100 years ago. And I think a lot of people, when they think about soldiers in war, they think, rightly so, they think of heroes and a lot of heroic imagery and people coming home to parades and things like that. And that's all fine and good. But those of us who remain safe at home often never imagine the horrors of war. And that's what Wilfred Owen was showing. He was showing the ugly side of war for the people who never have to go. So let's take a look at this short poem here. He calls it an anthem, and think about what an anthem is for a minute. An anthem, sort of a patriotic tune, a very boisterous sort of, more than just a song, not a poppy song, but rather a very devout, dedicated, patriotic song. So anthem for doomed youth. And the speaker here asks two questions. What passing bells for these who die as cattle? And passing bells is a religious sort of thing. Same thing on the next question. What candles may be held to speed them all? And candles, again, having a religious connotation. So to these questions, we get rather negative answers because one would think that, oh, our prayers are with our soldiers. However, let's hear how Owen responds to that. So what passing bells? What prayers for those who die as cattle? Meaning the soldiers have been dehumanized. They're cattle, animals being led off to the slaughter. They're not men or boys. And so the reply would be, of course, gunfire. That's what they'll be met with. And so the gunfire will be their hasty orisons, and you might not know what that means. So let's think about it. What passing religious tributes will these young men receive? Well, they'll receive hasty, meaning quick, uncommitted, and orisons, prayers. So the guns will be their quick, uncommitted prayers. And no mockeries now for them, no prayers, nor bells, nor any voice of mourning save the choirs, the shrill, demented choirs of wailing shells. Let's talk about that for a minute. The word save you probably understand to mean something like conserve or rescue, but in this context it actually means except for. In other words, the response to the question is that these young boys, the cattle, will not receive any prayers. Nobody will mourn the loss of these boys except for the choirs, the demented choirs of wailing shells. In other words, we usually think of choir taking place in a religious setting, like choir boys in church. But in this case, no, the choir will be made up of bombshells, and wailing means the loud cry of bombshells. And we also have bugles, which was a sound in World War I on the battlefield quite often. We get to the second question, what candles may be held to speed them all? In other words, we often hold up candles or light candles for the people that we lose in life, and we hope that that sends them on their way. And if you believe in heaven, then you light a candle in hopes that it will help somebody on their passage through to heaven. Well, these candles, they're not going to be held in the hands of boys, perhaps like choir altar boys, but rather in their eyes shall shine the holy glimmers of goodbyes. And look at this image. The pallor, meaning the pale faces of girls' brows, shall be their dark cloud or the dark cloth covering the coffin in a religious ceremony. Their flowers, the tenderness of patient minds, and each slow dusk a drawing down of blinds. So I'm hoping you can now see that Wilfred Owen was sort of reacting against a lot of the patriotic imagery that was associated with World War I. He was in the midst of it. He was in a war hospital, and he was injured, and he died on the battlefield. And so he gives us a glimpse into the real ugliness and horror of what it's like to be forgotten about in the moment during these terrible battles. So there you go. Again, like I said, not profound, just me giving you a little bit of vocab and a couple of my thoughts on how I read this particular poem.